Canada hit a big milestone this week, surpassing the U.S. in vaccination rate despite starting off very slow at the beginning of the year. But Canada is still behind the U.S. on an incredibly important issue, and I'll get to more on that later. First, if you followed my channel throughout this year, I did several videos on how Canada's vaccination rate had been horrible at the beginning of the year. We sort of put our bets on, or Trudeau put his bet on, putting a lot of money into vaccines from, of course, American producers. But we could have had our own vaccine producer and distributor as we used to in the 80s, but I'm not going to go deeper into that. I discussed a lot of that during the beginning of the year. But now, Trudeau's investment at the beginning of this pandemic has begun to pay off, and Canadians are taking the vaccine at a much higher rate than Americans. So let's take a look at some of this data here. So share of people vaccinated against COVID-19 as of July 22nd, 2021. You see here Canada has a total share of 70.64% of Canadians have at least one vaccine, with 53% having fully vaccinated, so both vaccines. And so 70% overall. US right now, 48% only have both vaccines. So you see here this week, Canada just surpassed the US, and it's continuing. A lot of this, I think, is due to American media. There is definitely a lot more conservative misinformation out there that is more prominent in American mainstream media compared to Canada. There really is no Tucker Carlson in Canada the way there is, of course, in the US. So I think that's a big piece of it. Take a look here at over time how this looked. So daily COVID-19 vaccine doses administered per 100 people. So you see here at about end of April, it looks like. Now it's gone. But Canada is there. Barely. But if you see faintly Canada in the image, there it is. Our vaccination rate at about, late April, looks like, May, across the U.S. in the amount of vaccines per 100 people on a daily basis, while the U.S. right now is sort of plateauing. That said, Canada, the rate is going down as more people are vaccinated, and now we're beginning to get to a point where the U.S. is at where we're almost hitting a wall, and less people are wanting to get the vaccine. And last graph here, this is daily COVID-19 cases per million people. The U.S. right now seeing insane increases in daily COVID cases because of the Delta variant that is a lot more transmissible than previous variants. Canada has sort of, it's gotten clearly a lot better, but checking recent numbers coming out, we are now hitting a point that we're either staying the same in terms of daily COVID cases, or in the case of Ontario, it's actually increasing compared to last week. So we're at a point now where if you are unvaccinated, you are very likely to get COVID-19. That's what medical professionals are saying, because this is where the virus is largely spreading. Of course, if you, there's always a chance that you may get COVID-19 regardless of how you're vaccinated. But even if you get it, as somebody who's vaccinated, it's a lot less likely to impair you in any sort of way. So the actual symptoms, if you have the vaccine, are lessened because of the vaccine. Whereas if you are unvaccinated, you are much likely to end up in the hospital. Recent figures out of cities like LA, 98.8% of people in the hospital from COVID-19 are unvaccinated. So even if you get the COVID-19 while being vaccinated, you're not going to end up in the hospital. More than likely, people that are unvaccinated, of course, are ending up there. But now let's get to this one area that the U.S. is still much better than Canada on. And that is, of course, the TRIPS waiver. So Canada, still along with the UK and Germany, are still standing in the way of the WTO TRIPS waiver, meaning that this waiver would allow the vaccines to be produced and distributed globally for a fraction of the cost. Biden recently, as I covered, I believe it was 2 months ago or a month ago, he finally came out in support of the TRIPS waiver. And I thought at the time that would sort of pressure other major countries like Canada, like Germany, like the UK to fall in line and support the waiver as well. But they haven't. They're still stalling. aligning right here, aligning with Big Pharma for various reasons. But that's right now the largest barrier to stopping COVID-19, because of course, the more you allow COVID-19 to spread, the more you allow it to mutate to the point that there may be a variant down the line that could render the current vaccines ineffective. So we have to vaccinate everybody in the entire world for us to actually eliminate the threat of a COVID-19 variant that could, infect even vaccinated people in a serious way. But more here from Common Dreams. Proponents argue that if approved, the patent waiver would help facilitate a rapid increase in coronavirus vaccine production, which has thus far failed to meet global needs, particularly in low-income countries, which have received just 1.1% of the 3.7 billion doses administered thus far. The waiver calls for a temporary suspension of vaccine-related intellectual property rules that are barring manufacturers around the world from making generic vaccines, a restriction that has left a handful of powerful pharmaceutical corporations with a monopoly over production. And yeah, that's the obvious reason why these rich countries are not in support of the TRIPS waiver, because they are siding with Big Pharma. So that is still, I think, the largest barrier to any real progress on really ending this pandemic. But at the very least, you see the impact here that media has. So Canadians, a lot more willing to get the vaccine in higher numbers, while Americans are, at least a large segment of the population, are being taken in by conspiracy theories and propaganda around vaccine hesitancy that is unfortunately misinforming millions.